Yes. Remember you make picture me like a ball, football. I saw every day. I watch. I watch at home.
Oh, you saw
How
it?
you do? Remember you?
Did you see?
Yeah. Ball and I put here.
Did you see on the internet?
No, internet. You picture. You give me picture.
Oh, picture.
A long time ago.
You were famous.
No, internet. No, I'm not using internet.
But you are famous.
I put my girlfriend. My
Your
telephone
girlfriend?
girlfriend.
Put your girlfriend?
Well, I'm reading from the History of the Sikhs by J.D. Cunningham, but just from on page 31. It's the reforms before the Sikhs. During the same century, the learned enthusiast Goraknath gave popularity, especially in the Punjab, to the doctrine of the yoga, which belonged more properly as a theory or practice to the Buddhist faith, but which was equally adopted as a philosophic dogma by the followers of Vyasa and Sakya. It was, however, held that in this Kali Yuga, or Iron Age, fallen man was unequal to so great a penance, or to the attainment of complete beatitude. But Gorak taught that intense mental abstraction would etherize the body of the most slowly and gradually unite his spirit with the all-pervading soul of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. No, because it doesn't matter.
He chose Shiva as the deity who would thus bless the austere perseverance of his votaries of whatever caste, and not content with the ordinary frontal marks of sex and persuasions, he distinguished his disciples by boring their ears, whence they are familiarly known as the Kanpata, or ear-torn yogis. Kanpata yogis. Footnote 1, Wilson, and the Dabistan says, in the latter, Fundfani shows some points of conformity between the yogis and the Mohammedans. With regard to yoga, in a scientific point of view, it may be observed that it corresponds with the state of abstraction and self-consciousness, which raised the soul above mortality, or chance, and enabled it to apprehend the true and the grasp of Plato's idea, or archaical form of the world, and that neither Indians nor Greeks considered man capable, in his present and perfect condition, of attaining such a degree of union with God or knowledge of the truth. Were necessary to pursue the correspondence further, it would be found that Plato's whole system is almost identical in its rudimental characteristics with the schemes of Kapil and Kanpatanjali. Jointly, thus God and matter are in both eternal Mahat, or intelligence, or the informing spirit of the world, is the same with Nos, or Logos, and so on. With both God, that is Purush, in the one, and the supreme God in the other, would seem to be separate from the world as appreciable by man. It may further be observed that the Sankara system is divided into two schools independent of that of Patanjali, the first of which requires Purush simply as life, depending for activity upon adrist, chance, or fate, while the second holds the term to not an active or prominent ruler, and gives to vitality a distinct existence. The school potentially differs from this latter principally in its terminology and in the mode yoga, laid down for attaining bliss. One of the four subdivisions of which mode, vis-a-vis that of stopping the breath, is allowed to be the doctrine of Gorak. It is declared to have been followed of old by Markant in a manner more agreeable to the Vedas than practice of the recent reformer. That's all a footnote. Do you read footnotes faster? Yeah, I read the footnotes a little faster than the text. It's amazing how insightful this guy is about religion when he's just proposes to be a historian. A step was thus made, and faith and abandonment of the pleasures of the life were held to abrogate the distinctions of race, which had taken so firm a hold on the pride and vanity of the rich and powerful. In the next generation, or about the year 1450, the mysterious weaver, Kabir, a disciple of Ramananda, assailed at once the worship of idols, the authority of the Quran and the Shastras, and the exclusive use of a learned language. He addressed Mohammedans as well as Hindus. He urged them to call upon him, the invisible Kabir, and to strive continually after inward purity. He personified creation or the world as Maya, or as woman, prolific of deceit and illusion, and thus denounced man's weakness or his proneness to evil. Practically, Kabir admitted outward conformity and leaned towards Rama or Vishnu as the most perfect type of God. Like his predecessors, he erringly gave shape and attributes to the divinity, and he further limited the application of his doctrines of reform by declaring retirement from the world to be desirable, and the sad or pure or perfect man, the passive or inoffensive votary, to be the living resemblance of the Almighty. The views, however, of Kabir are not very distinctly laid down or clearly understood, but the latitude of usage, which he sanctioned in his employment of a spoken dialect, have rendered his writings extensively popular among the lower orders of India. Yeah, he goes back to this Dabistan, D-A-B-I-S-T-A-N, Wilson, but he's writing in like 1840, so, and actually that's an advantage. He's able to write, that's an advantage. To be 1840 is preferable. Okay, God. Dabistan, and words Hindus. Kabir is an Arabic word meaning the greatest. Great. Greater than great. Remember, Kabir is greater than great. And the Professor Wilson doubts whether any such person ever existed and considers the Kabir of Musin fame to be the personification of an idea, and that the title was assumed by a Hindu freethinker as a disguise. The name, however, although significant, is now at least not uncommon, and perhaps the ordinary story that Kabir was a foundling, reared by a weaver and subsequently admitted as a disciple by Ramanand is sufficiently probable to justify his identity. His body is stated to have been claimed both by the Hindus and Muslims. And Mushfani observes that many Mohammedans became Paragis and ascetics of the modern Vaishnava sect, or of which the followers of Ramanand and Kabir form the principal subdivisions. As a further instance of the fusion of feeling then and now, going forward, the reply of the Hindu deist Akanath to the keepers of the Kaaba at Mecca may be quoted. He first scandalized them by asking where was the master of the house, and then he inquired why the idols had been thrown out. He was told that the works of men were not to be worshipped, whereupon he inquired whether the temple itself was not reared with hands and therefore undeserving of respect. Yeah, the temples are deserving of respect. But the buildings, because they're made by somebody's hand. Kabir, that is. In the beginning of the 16th century, the reforms of Brahmanand were introduced into Bengal by Chatan, a Brahmin of Nadia. He converted some Mohammedans and admitted all classes as members of his sect, insisted upon bhakti, or faith, as chastising the most impure. He allowed marriage and secular occupations, but his followers abused the usual injunction of reverence for the teacher, and some of them held that the guru was to be invoked before God. About the same period, Vallabh Swami, a Brahmin of Telangana, gave a further impulse to the Reformation in progress, and he taught that he taught that married teachers were not only admissible as directors of the conscience, but that the householder was to be preferred, and that the world was to be enjoyed by both master and disciple. His principle was readily adopted by the peaceful mercantile classes, and the Kusains, as the conductors of family worship, have acquired a commanding influence over the industrious quietists of the country, but they have at the same time added to the diversity of the prevailing idolatry by giving preeminence to Bala Gopal, the infant Krishna, as the very God of the universe. Thus, in the beginning of the 16th century, the Hindu mind was no longer stagnant or regressive. It had been leavened with Mohammedanism and changed and quickened by a new development we're talking about here. Yeah, we're talking about the new development. Like he was saying, the stuff he said about the old religions. I don't know if I'll get into that. But it was time for a new development. Okay. Yeah. The Brahmanism and the Buddhism and the Islam had all become a little stagnant. Ramanand and Gorak had preached religious equality, and Chatan had repeated that faith leveled caste. Kabir had denounced images and appealed to the people with their own tongue, and Vallabha had taught that effective devotion was compatible with the ordinary duties of the world. Yeah, I could be an ordinary guy and have effective devotion. Wow. But these good and able men appear to have been so impressed with the nothingness of this life that they deem the amelioration of man's social condition to be unworthy of a thought. They aim chiefly at emancipation from priestcraft. Yeah, right now I'm trying to emancipate myself from priestcraft, or from the grossness of idolatry and polytheism. They formed pious associations of contented quietists. Yeah, I may join up with some contented quietists. Or they gave themselves up to the contemplation of futurity in the hope of approaching bliss, rather than called upon their fellow creatures to throw aside every social as well as religious trammel and to arise a new people freed from the debasing corruption of ages. Te perfected forms of descent rather than planted the germs of nations, and their sects remain to this day as they left them. It was reserved for Nanak, N-A-N-A-K, to perceive the true principles of reform. Yeah, he's got the true principles of reform. And to lay those broad foundations which enabled his successor, Gobind, to fire the minds of his countrymen with a new nationality and to give practical effect to the doctrine that the lowest is equal to the highest. Yeah. The lowest person is equal to the highest. And Gobind is the 10th guru. To the highest in race, as in creed, in political rights, as in religious hopes. Yeah, they're all equal. The Nanak was born in the year 1469. 1469. In the neighborhood of Lahore, his father, Kalu, was a Hindu of the Bedi subdivision of the once warlike Kastriyas, and he was perhaps, like most of his race, a petty trader in his native village. Yeah, they're all petty traders, basically. And stated that Nanak's father was a grain merchant, and that Nanak himself was a grain factor. The Sikh accounts are mostly silent about the occupation of the father, but they represent the sister of Nanak to have been married to a corn factor. So he's a corn trader. Nanak appears to have been naturally of a pious disposition and of a reflecting mind, and there is a reason to believe that in his youth he made himself familiar with the popular creeds, both of the Mohammedans and the Hindus, and that he gained a general knowledge of the Quran and of the Brahmatical Shastras. Manuscript compilation in Persian mentions that Nanak's first teacher was a Mohammedan, Shar Sasek. Nanak was carefully educated by one Sayyid Hassan, a neighbor of his father who conceived a regard for him and who was wealthy but childless. Nanak is further said in the same book to have studied the most approved writings of the Mohammedans, according to Malcolm. Nanak is reported by Mohammedans to have learnt all earthly sciences from Khizar, the prophet Elias. The ordinary Mohammedan accounts also represent Nanak when a child to have astonished his teacher by asking him the hidden import of the first letter of the alphabet, which is almost a straight stroke in Persian and Arabic, and which is even vulgarly to denote the unity of God. The reader will remember that the apocryphal Gospels state how Christ, before he was 12 years old, perplexed his instructors and explained to them the mystical significance of the alphabetical characters, as in the life of Jesus Strauss. Yeah, some guy. Life of Jesus by Strauss. Really? His good sense and fervent temper left him displeased with the corruptions of the vulgar faith and dissatisfied with the indifference of the learned and with the refuge which he sought in this specious abstractions of philosophy. Nor is it improbable that the homilies of Kabir and Gorakh had fallen upon his susceptible mind with a powerful and enduring effect. In a moment of enthusiasm, the ardent inquirer abandoned his home and strove to attain wisdom by meditation, by study, and by an enlarged intercourse with mankind. He traveled perhaps beyond the limits of India. He prayed in solitude. He reflected on the Vedas and on the mission of Muhammad, and he questioned with equal anxiety the learned priest and the simple devotee about the will of God and the path to happiness. Plato and Bacon, Descartes and Al-Ghazali examined the current philosophical systems of the world without finding a sure basis of truth for the operations of the intellect. And similarly, the heart of the pious Nanak sought hopelessly for a resting place amid the conflicting creeds and practices of man. All was error, he said. He had read Qurans and Purans, but he had read Qurans and Purans. Have you read Qurans and Purans? What happened to the pencil? He read Qurans and Purans, but God he had nowhere found. That rhymes so different. Qurans and Purans. I'm going to steal that one. He returned to his native land. He threw aside the habit of an ascetic. He became again the father of his family. And he passed the remainder of his long life in calling upon men to worship the one invisible God, to live virtuously and to be tolerant of the failings of others. Yeah. At least you could do that. Be tolerant of the failings of others, okay? That's the least you could do, my God. The mild demeanor, the earnest piety, and the persuasive elegance of Nanak are ever the themes of praise, and he died at the age of 70. Leaving behind him many zealous and admiring disciples. Okay. Wow. The accounts mostly agree as to the date of Nanak's death, and they place it in 1596 or 1539 of Christ. The Gurmukhi abstract states precisely that he was a teacher for 7 years, 5 months, and 7 days, and that he died on the 10th of the Hindu month Ashgash. Represents that he traveled for 15 years. Nanak died at Ekataparana, about 40 miles above Lahore, where there is a place of worship sacred to him. He left his son, Sri Chand, an ascetic whose name lives as the founder of the Hindu sect of Udasis, and Laki Das, who devoted himself to pleasure, and of whom nothing particular is known. The Nanak Putras and the descendants of Nanak, also Sahibzadas, or sons of the Master, are everywhere revered among the Sikhs.
When's he come back?
And if traitors, some privileges are conceded to them by the chiefs of the country.
Where's Lobster?
Oh. No. Let's see. He read several Qurans and Purans. I'm continuing with the history of the Sikhs. Let's see. It's published a serious account.
What's a series?
Joseph Davy Cunningham. So he's a Davy, lieutenant engineer and captain of the army in India. History of the Sikhs from the origin of the nation to the battles of the city. 1849. Joseph Davy Cunningham, 1812 to 1851. So he died after the book, I guess. Wow. So he's an on-site kindergarten? Yeah, he was on the site. The Adi Granth abounds with passages of a similar tone, and in the supplemental portion called the Ratan Mala, Nanak says, man may read Vedas and Qurans and reach to a temporary bliss, but without God, salvation is unattainable. So, it's not attainable. Nanak combined the excellences of preceding reformers, and he avoided the more grave errors into which they had fallen. Instead of the circumscribed divinity, the anthropomorphous god of Ramanand and Kabir, he loftily invokes the Lord as the One, the Soul, the timeless being, the Creator, the self-existent, the incomprehensible, and the everlasting. He likens the deity to truth, which was there before the world began, which is and which shall endure forever, as the ultimate idea or cause of all we know or behold. He addresses equally the mullah and the pandit, the dervish and the sannyasi, and tells them to remember that Lord of Lords who has seen come and go numberless Mohammedans and Vishnus and Shivas. He tells them that virtues and charities, heroic acts, and gathered wisdom are not of themselves, that the only knowledge which avails is the knowledge of God. And then, as if to rebuke those vain men who saw eternal life in their own act of faith, he declares that they only can find God on whom the Lord looks with favor. Yeah, you can't find him unless he looks on you with favor. So he has to favor it. So you're not going to find him unless he wants to be found. So, footnote 1. Then it says here, paradise lost, but thought's the slave of life, and life time's full, and time that takes survey of all the world must have a stop. Or wait, is that Henry the Fourth? Actually, what? Yeah, that's Shakespeare, and Paradise Lost is for time, though in eternity applied to motion measures all things durable by present, past, and future. Okay. Yet the extension of grace is linked with the exercise of our will. Okay. So if you exercise your will in doing meditation, then you might get an extension of grace and the beneficent use of our faculties.
Exercise.
Faith, grace, and good works, all necessary. Okay. God said, Nanak places salvation in good works and uprightness of conduct. The Lord will ask of man What has he done? Yeah, he's going to ask you what you've done. Then the teacher further requires timely repentance of men, saying, if not until the day of reckoning, the sinner abaseth himself. Punishment shall overtake him. Yeah. Nanak adopted the philosophical system of his countrymen and regarded bliss as the dwelling of the soul with God after its punitory transmigration shall have ceased. Life, he says, is as the shadow of the passing bird, but the soul of man as the potter's wheel, ever circling on its pivot. He makes the same uses of the current language or notions of the time on other subjects, and thus says he, who remains bright amid darkness, unmoved amid deceit, that is, perfect amid temptation. Yeah. If I could just be perfect amid temptation, shall attain happiness. But it would be idle to suppose that he speculated upon being or upon the material world after the manner of Plato or Vashna, and it would be unreasonable to condemn him because he preferred the doctrine of a succession of habiliments and the possible purification of the most sinful soul to the resurrection of the same body and the pains of everlasting fire. Nanak also preferred to the Arabian prophet and to the Hindu incarnations, not as impostors or the diffusers of evil, but as having truly been sent by God to instruct mankind, and he lamented that sin should nevertheless prevail. He asserted no special divinity, although he may possibly have considered himself as he came to be considered by others, the successor of these inspired teachers of his belief, sent to reclaim fallen mortals of all creeds and countries within the limits of his knowledge. He rendered his mission applicable to all times and places, yet he declared himself to be but the slave, the humble messenger of the Almighty, making use of the universal truth as his sole instrument. He did not claim for his writings, replete as they were with wisdom and devotion, the merit of a direct transcription of the words of God, nor did he say that his own preaching required or would be sanctified by miracles. Yeah, I'm not sanctifying.
Nice. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Only one shot. One second.
I go to the restroom.
Podcast by doing anything miraculous in it. So, fight with no weapon, he said, save the word of God. A holy teacher hath no means save the purity of his doctrine. He taught that asceticism or abandonment of the world was unnecessary. Though the pious hermit and the devout householder being equal in the eyes of the Almighty, but he did not, like his contemporary Allah, express any invidious preference for married teachers, although his own example showed that he considered everyone should fulfill the functions of his nature. In treating the two prominent external observances of Hindus and Mohammedans, veneration for the cow and abhorrence of the pig, Yeah, the Hindus have veneration for the cow, which also Zarathustra, Zoroaster does. And the Mohammedans, abhorrence of the hog. He was equally wise and conciliatory, yielding perhaps something to the prejudice of his education as well as to the gentleness of his disposition. The rights of strangers, said he, are the one the ox and the other the swine, but purs and gurus will praise those who partake not of that which hath enjoyed life. Yeah, you shouldn't partake of those things. But it said that Nanak prohibited swine's flesh, but indeed the flesh of the tame hog had always been forbidden to Hindus. Dabistan states that Nanak prohibited wine and pork, and himself abstained from all flesh, but in truth, contradictory passages about food may be quoted in this word. In the Hindu shows that Nanak defended those who eat flesh and declared that the infant would draw nurture from its mother, live virtually upon flesh. The author of the Gurratana pursues the idea in a somewhat trivial manner indeed by asking whether man does not take women to wife and whether the holiest of books are not bound with the skins of animals. The general injunctions of Nanak have sometimes been misinterpreted by sectarian followers and alarmed strangers to mean great shariness of animals' life, almost in a mere ceremonial sense. The Sikhs have no such feeling, although the Jains and others carry a pious regard for worms and flies to a ludicrous extent, a practice of which has reacted upon at least some families of Roman Catholic Christians in India, those in Bhopal. Reject during Lent the use of unrefined sugar and article de consumption because in its manufacture the lives of many insects are necessary.
You ready?
This damn watch is screwed up. Should take it. Hold on a second.
Necessarily sacrificed? Yeah. If you eat sugar, you're killing a lot of insects. It is curious that the Greeks and Romans believed the life of the ox to have been held sacred during the Golden Age. And Cicero quotes Aratus to show that it was only during the Iron Age the flesh of cattle began to be eaten. Yeah. On the Nature of the Gods, Franklin translation, Cicero. Yeah, so it's only if you're in the Iron Age that you eat meat. Okay. If you're an Iron Man, I guess. Thus Nanak extricated his followers from the accumulated errors of ages and enjoined upon them devotion of thought and excellence of conduct as the first of duties. He left them erect and free, unbiased in mind, and unfettered by rules to become an increasing body of truthful worshipers. So they are truthful worshipers. His reform was in its immediate effect religious and moral only. Believers were regarded as Sikhs, or Sikhs, or disciples, not as subjects. It is neither probable nor is it necessary to suppose that he possessed any clear and sagacious views of social liberation or the political advancement. He left the progress of his people to the operation of time, for his congregation was too limited and the state of society too artificial to render it either requisite requisite or possible for him to become a municipal lawgiver, to subvert the legislation of Mano, or to change the memorial usages of tribes and races. His care was rather to prevent his followers contracting into a sect, and his comprehensive principles narrowing into the monastic distinctions. Thus he effected by excluding his son, a meditative and perhaps bigoted ascetic, from the ministry when he shall himself be no more, and as his end approached, he stated to have made a trial of the obedience and merits of his chosen disciples, and to have preferred the simple and sincere Lena. As they journeyed along, the body of a man was seen laying by the wayside. Nanak said, "Ye who trust in me, eat of this food." All hesitated, so late. He knelt and uncovered the dead and touched without tasting the flesh of man, but beheld the corpse had disappeared, and Nanak was in its place. The Guru embraced his faithful follower, saying he was as himself and that his spirit would dwell within him. The name of Lena was changed to Angat, or own body, whatever may be the foundation. That's the second Guru, A-N-G-A-D. Whatever may be the foundation of the story of the truth of etymology, it is certain that the Sikhs fully believe the spirit of Nanak to have been incarnated in each succeeding Guru. Okay. All right. I guess that would make him Gopan Singh. Angad was acknowledged as the teacher of the Sikhs, and Sri Chand, the son of Nanak, justified his father's fears and became the founder of the Hindu sect of Udasis, and a community indifferent to the concerns of this world. Yeah. So that's the end of chapter 2, which I started in the middle, so I didn't read the whole book. I started page 31, though, just because that's where I was, and that was convenient. So that's up to page 43.
Yeah, 1 second.
What could be more valuable than reading about the history of the youngest religion? Yeah, I guess that would be the most valuable, yeah. So, because it would be the most vital. Okay. So I'm continuing on page 62 in the history of the Sikhs. Such is Goban's mode of presenting his mission, but his followers have extended the allegory and have variously given an earthly close to his celestial vision. He stated to have performed the most austere devotions at the wane of the goddess mother of mankind on the summit of the hill named Ananya, and to have asked how in the olden times the heroic Arjan transpierced the multitudes with an arrow. He was told that by prayer and sacrifice the power had been attained. He invited from Benares a Brahmin of great fame, for piety and for power over the unseen world, he himself carefully consulted the Vedas, and he called upon his numerous disciples to aid in the awful ceremony he was about to perform. Awful is like, I think in the Victorian age meant like, it's not an awful ceremony, it's actually awe-inspiring maybe. Before all, he makes successful trial of this virtue of the magician, and of an ample altar is laboriously prepared for the ham, or burnt offering. He is told that the goddess will appear to him, and arms shade, and that untaunted he should hail her and ask for fortune. The guru, terror-struck, could but advance a sword, as if in salutation to the dread appearance. I don't know why there's a quote here from Paradise Lost. It says, he asked, but all the heavenly choir stood mute, and silence was in heaven on man's behalf. Patron and intercessor none appeared, until Christ himself said, account me, man, I for his sake will leave thy bosom, and this glory next to thee freely put off. The goddess touched it in token of acceptance, and a divine weapon, an axe of iron, was seen amid the flames. The sign was declared to be propitious, but fear had rendered the sacrifice incomplete, and Goban must die himself or devote to death one dear to him to ensure the triumph of his faith. I wonder if his faith has triumphed too. I guess it has in a way. His faith has triumphed. The Guru smiled sadly. He smiled sadly. That's sort of the way I smile. He said he had yet much to accomplish in this world, and that his father's spirit was still unappeased. He looked towards his children, but maternal affection withdrew them. 25 disciples then sprang forward and declared their readiness to perish. One was gladdened by being chosen, and the fates were satisfied. This legend is taken with several variations, and one may be seen in Malcolm's sketch and another in MacGregor, History of the Sikhs. Perhaps the true origin of the myth is to be found in Goban's reputed vision during sleep of the great goddess. The occurrence is placed in the year 1696, Malcolm's sketch. That's the footnote. Gobind is next represented to have again assembled his followers and made known to them the great objects of his mission. The new faith had been declared, and henceforth the Khalsa, the saved or liberated, should alone prevail. Khalsa or Khalisa is of Arabic derivation and has such original or secondary meanings as pure, special, free. So they're pure, special, and free. And it is commonly used in India to denote the immediate territories of any chief or state as distinguished from the lands of tributaries and feudal followers. Khalsa can thus be held either to denote the kingdom of Gobind, or that the Sikhs are the chosen people. So they became the chosen people. God must be worshipped in truthfulness and sincerity. Yeah, and this podcast should be truthful and sincere. God must be worshipped in truthfulness and sincerity, but no material resemblance must degrade the omnipotence. The Lord could only be beheld by the eye of faith in the general body of the Khalsa. This assurance is given in the Rita Nama and the rule of life of Gobind, which However, it's not included in the Granth, and in the same composition he says and is held to have said that the believer who wishes to see the Guru should behold it in the Khalsa. Really? All he said must become as one. The lowest were equal in the highest. Caste must be forgotten. They must accept the Pahu, or initiation from him. Pahu. Initiation from him. Pahu. Pronounced nearly as Paul, meaning literally a gate, a door, and hence initiation. The door word may have the same root as the Greek word Paul. Paul. P-A-H-U-L. Pronounced Paul. It may have the same root as the Greek word. Oh, okay. I have to get initiated. And the four races must eat as one out of one vessel. The Turks must be destroyed. End of story. That's awful to say about the Turks. How could you say that? That's mean. The Turks must be destroyed and the graves of those called saints neglected. Whoa. And the ways of the Hindus must be abandoned. Their temples viewed as holy and the rivers looked upon as sacred. The Brahman's thread must be broken. By means of the Khalsa alone could salvation be attained. They must surrender themselves wholly to their faith and to him, their guide. Their words must be Pritanash, Kulnash, Dharmnash, Karmnash, and the forsaking of occupation and family, of belief and ceremonies. Do thus, said Gobind, and the world is yours. Yeah, if I do this, the world could be mine. If I do this podcast, the world could be mine. Many Brahmin and Kashtriya followers murmured, but the condemned races rejoiced. They remind Gobind of their devotion and services and asked that they also should be allowed to bathe in the sacred pool and offer up prayers in the temple of Amritsar. Yeah, I don't know if I bathed in the pool at Amritsar. I must have put something in the water. I can't say that I bathed in it. I must have dipped in it. You'd think I would have dipped in it. The murmurings of the twice-born increased, and many took their departure, but Gobind exclaimed that the lowly should be raised. Yeah, the lowly, I agree with that. The lowly should be raised. And that hereafter the despised should dwell next to himself. Yeah, if I'm despised in this podcast, then I'll dwell next to Gobind. Okay. That sounds good. Chirhas, or the men of the sweeper caste, brought away the remains of Teg Baharta from Delhi and has been mentioned. Many of that despised but not oppressed race have adopted the Sikh faith in the Punjab, and they are commonly known as Rangahita Sikhs. Rangar is a term applied to the Rajputs about Delhi who have become Mohammedans, but in a Malwa on the predatory Hindu Rajputs are similarly styled, perhaps from rank, a poor man, in their opposition to Rana. On a high degree, Rangita seems thus rather a diminutive of Rangar than a derivative of Rang. As commonly understood, the Rangut Sikhs are sometimes styled Mazhabi or Mohammedan faith from the circumstance that the converts from Islam are so-called, and that many sweepers throughout India have become Mohammedans. Yeah, if I was a sweeper in India, I wouldn't. It's no wonder you became a Mohammedan. Yeah, I would have became a Mohammedan if I was a sweeper. These Mazhabis in the past have proved themselves and are at the present time extremely good soldiers. The pioneer regiments, 23rd, 32nd, 34th, into which they are recruited, have a proud record of service in many campaigns. Mr. Chandler, in an article in the Black Words magazine, September 1909, observes the general reluctance of the low-caste Hindu to elevate himself by becoming a Sikh may perhaps be explained by the historical exception of the Mazhabis. These Sikhs, the descendants of converts from the despised sweeper caste, were welcomed by the Khalsa at a time when they were engaged in a desperate struggle with the forces of Islam. But when the Sikhs dominated the Punjab, they found that the equality their religion promised, their religion promises equality. Found that the equality the religion promised them existed in theory rather than in fact. Oh, really? They occupied much of the same position among the Jat, and the Khalsa described Sikhs as their ancestors. The sweepers enjoyed among Hindus, they were debarred from all privileges and were at one time excluded from the army. Yeah, I think sometimes biases continue to persist, even in equalized systems. I've seen that. Yeah, you are still not absolutely accepting of all ethnic groups. Absolutely. Okay. So you aren't? I'm not? I thought I was. I thought you were totally enlightened. I doubt that you are totally enlightened. Unless you read this book or listen to this podcast, then you would be. And that thereby the despised should dwell next to himself. I'm dwelling next to Goban, if I do this podcast. Goban then poured water into a vessel and stirred it with the sacrificial axe. And with the sword rendered divine by the touch of the goddess, his wife passed by, and as it were by chance, bearing confections of 5 kinds, he hailed the omen as propitious, for the coming of women denoted on an offspring to the Khalsa numerous as the leaves of the forest. He mingled the sugars with the water and then sprinkled a portion of it upon 5 faithful disciples, 5 of them. A Brahmin, a Kshatriya, and 3 Sudras. He hailed them as Singhs. This is where I became David Singh Smith. He hailed them as Singhs, Singhs, and declared them to be the Khalsa. That's why you prefer people with the last name Singh. Like when you see a taxi driver with the last name Singh, you say Vaheguru and you say Satnam and stuff. Yeah. He himself received from them the Pao, or initiation, or Namdan of his faith, and became Gobind Singh, saying that hereafter, whenever 5 Sikhs should be assembled together, there he also would be present. So if I can get 5 of these guys together, then Gobind Singh will be present. Okay.
Boingo, mamma mia. 1 second.
5 already. Come on!
1 second.
This is more a sample of the book than a reading of the book, because it's not that all the readings are not contiguous, so you don't have Oh, the curly. We can't get the missing pages. So I suggest you get the book. You could get the book this one's from the library, because I don't want to lie to you, but I got it from the library. I know I lie a lot, but it's from Satvik Books, which is books in Amritsar. It's by Joseph Davy Cunningham, not just Cunningham, but Davy. Akbar did something to remove his antagonism between the rulers and the ruled, but his successors were less wise than him. Yeah, Akbar was wise, but the successors were less wise than him. And religious discontent was soon added to the love of political independence. The southern portions of India, too, were at this time recent conquest, and Aurangzeb. I never liked Aurangzeb. When I read that book about him and Darius Shikoh, who I love, I hate Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb had been long absent, hopelessly endeavoring to consolidate his sway in the distant quarter. The Himalayas had scarcely been penetrated by the Mughals, except in the direction of Kashmir, and rebellion might rear its head almost unheeded amid these wild recesses. Lastly, during this period, Shivaji had aroused the slumbering spirit of the Maratha tribes. He had converted rude herdsmen into successful soldiers and had become a territorial chief in the very neighborhood of the emperor. Gobind added religious fervor to warlike temper, and his design of founding a kingdom of Jats upon the waning glories of Aurangzeb's dominion does not appear to have been idly conceived or rashly undertaken. We're now talking about Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru of the Sikhs. It is not easy to place the actions of Gobind into order or to understand the particular object of each of his proceedings. He is stated by a credible Mohammedan author to have organized his followers into troops and bands and to have placed them under the command of trustworthy disciples. He appears to have entertained a body of Pathans who are everywhere the soldiers of fortune, and it is certain that he established 2 or 3 forts along the skirts of the hills between the Sutli and Jumna. He had a post at Panta in the Kurda Valley near Nahan, a place long afterwards the scene of a severe struggle between the Gurkhas and the English. He had likewise a retreat at Anandpur Makowa, which had been established by his father. And a third at Chamkar, fairly in the plains and lower down the subtly than the chosen haunt of Teg Bahadur. He had thus got strongholds which secured him against any attempts of his hill neighbors, and he would next seem to have endeavored to mix himself up in the affairs of these half-independent chiefs and to obtain a commanding influence over them as by degrees to establish a virtual principality amid mountain fastnesses to serve as the basis of his operations against the Mughal Empire. Wow. As a religious teacher, he drew contributions and procured followers from all parts of India. But as a leader, he perceived the necessity of a military pivot, and as a rebel, he was not insensible to the value of secure retreat. Gobind had himself described the several actions in which he was engaged, either as a principal or as an ally. Namely, in the Vichitar Natak, already quoted as a portion of the second Granth, the Guru Bilas by Sukhya Singh corroborates Gobind's account and adds many details. Malcolm's sketch may be referred to for translation of some portions of the Natak bearing on the period, but Malcolm's own general narrative of the events is obviously contradictory and inaccurate. There's some book of His pictures are animated. They are of some value as historical records, and their sequence seems more probable than that of any other narrative. His first contest was with his old friend, the chief of Nahan, aided by the Raja of Hindur, to whom he had given offense, and by the mercenary Pathans in his own service. He claimed arrears of pay. Who claimed arrears of pay, and who may have hoped to satisfy all demands by the destruction of Gobind and the plunder of his establishments. But the Guru was victorious. Some of the Pathan leaders fell, and Gobind slew the young warrior Hari Chand of Nalakar with his own hand. The Guru nevertheless deemed it prudent to move to the subtlety. He strengthened Anupur and became the ally of Bhim Chand of Kulur, who was in the resistance to the imperial authorities of Katkangra. The Mohammedan commander was joined by various hill chiefs, but in the end he was routed, and Bhim Chand's rebellion seemed justified by success. A period of rest ensued, during which, says Gobind, he punished such of his followers as were lukewarm or disorderly. Yeah, I don't like lukewarm or disorderly disciples, so I would punish them, I think so. But the aid which he rendered to the chief of Kulur was not forgotten, and a body of Mohammedan troops made an unsuccessful attack upon his position. Again, an imperial commander took the field, partly to coerce Gobind, and partly to reduce the hill Rajas who, profiting by the example of Bhim Chand, had refused to pay their usual tribute. Yeah. A lot of people refused to pay. So, a desultory warfare ensued. Some attempts at accommodation were made by the hill chiefs, but these were broken off, and the exposition ended in the rout of the Mohammedans. The success of Gobind for all was attributed to him. Caused the Mohammedans some anxiety, and his designs appear likewise to have alarmed the hill chiefs, for they loudly claimed the imperial aid against one who announced himself as the true king. Wow. Kansip, directed the governors of Lahore and Sirhind to march against the Guru. And it was rumored that the emperor's son, Bahadur Shah, would himself take the field in their support. Gobind was surrounded at Anupur by the forces of the empire. His resolution was equal to any emergency, but numbers of his followers deserted him. He cursed them in this world and in the world to come. And others who wavered he caused to renounce their faith and then dismissed them with ignominy. But his difficulties increased. Desertions continued to take place, and at last he found himself at the head of no more than 40 devoted followers. His mother, his wives, and his 2 youngest children effected their escape to Sirhind, but the boys were there, betrayed to the Mohammedans and put to death. I heard this is a terrible story. The most detailed account of this murder of Gobind's children is given in Brown's Indian Tracts. Oh no. You have to read that part. I'm trying to say that it's not just these current times with the terrible atrocities in Ukraine, that there have been terrible atrocities over time. The faithful 40 said they were ready to die with the priest and the king. They prayed him to recall his curse upon their weaker-hearted brethren and to restore them the hope of salvation. Gobind said that his wrath would not endure, but he still clung to temporal success. The fort of Chamkar remained in his possession, and he fled during the night and reached the place in safety. At Chamkar, Gobind was again besieged. Oh no. He was called upon to surrender his person and to renounce his faith. But Ajit Singh, his son, indignantly silenced the bearer of the message. The troops pressed upon the Sikhs, and the Guru was himself everywhere present. But his 2 surviving sons fell before his eyes, and his little band was nearly destroyed. He at last resolved upon escape, and taking advantage of a dark night, he treaded his way to the outskirts of the camp. But there he was recognized and stopped by 2 Panthans. These men, it was said, had in former times received kindness at the hands of the Guru, and they now assisted him in reaching the town of Balupur, where he trusted his person to a 3rd follower of Islam, one per Muhammad, with whom it is further said the Guru had once studied the Quran. Here he ate food from Mohammedans and declared that such might be done by Sikhs under pressing circumstances. Here he was able to eat food from Mohammedans. He further disguised himself in the blue dress of a Muslim dervish and speedily reached the waste of Batinda. His disciples again rallied around him, and he succeeded in repulsing his pursuers at a place since called Utsar, or the Pool of Salvation. He continued his flight to Dhamma, or the breathing place halfway between Hansi and Firozipur. The imperial authorities thought his strength sufficiently broken, and they did not follow him further into the parched and barren country. At Dam Gobind remained for some time, and he occupied himself in composing the supplemental Granth, the book of the 10th King, to rouse the energies and sustain the hopes of the faithful. This comprises the Vichit Natak, or wondrous tale, the only historic portion of either Granth of which he concludes by him in praise of God who had ever assisted him. He would, he says, make known in another book the things which he had himself accomplished, the glories of the Lord which he had witnessed. And his recollections or visions of his antecedent existence. All he had done, he said, had been done with the aid of the Almighty, and to well and by the mysterious virtue of iron, he attributed his preservation. While thus living in retirement, messengers arrived to summon him to the emperor's presence. But Gogan replied to Ranzeb in a series of parables admonitory of kings, partly in which and partly in a letter which accompanied them. He remonstrates rather than humbles himself. He denounces the wrath of God upon the monarch rather than deprecates the imperial anger against himself. He tells the emperor that he puts no trust in him, that the Khalsa will avenge him. He refers to Nanak's religious reform, and he briefly alludes to the death of Arjan and of Teg Bahadur. He describes his own wrongs and his childless condition. He was as one without earthly link, patiently waiting death and fearing none but the sole emperor, the king of kings. Nor, said he, are the prayers of the poor ineffectual, and on the day of reckoning it will be seen how the emperor would justify his manifold cruelties and oppressions. The Guru was again desired to remove to Ranzeb's presence, and he really appears to have proceeded to the south sometime before the aged monarch was removed by death. Oh, that's one way to get rid of him. Yeah. Ranzeb died in the beginning of 1707, and his eldest son, Bahadur Shah, hastened from Kabul to secure the succession. He vanquished and slew one brother near Agra, and marching to the south, he defeated a second, Kambash, who died of his wounds. While engaged in his last campaign, Bahadur summoned Gobind to his throne. The Guru went. He was treated with respect, and he received a military command in the valley of Godavari. The emperor perhaps thought that the leader of insurrectionary Jats might be usefully employed in opposing rebellious Marathas, and Gobind perhaps saw in the imperial service a ready way of disarming suspicion and of reorganizing his followers. At Dhamma, he had again denounced evil upon all who should henceforth desert him. In the south, he selected the daring Banda as an instrument, and the Sikhs speedily appeared in overwhelming force upon the banks of the Salari. But Gobind's race was run, and he was not himself fated to achieve aught more in person. He had engaged the services of an Afghan half-adventurer, half-merchant, and he had procured from him a considerable number of horses. The merchant or servant pleaded his own necessities and urged the payment of large sums to him. Impatient with delays, he used an angry gesture, and his mutterings of violence provoked Gobind to strike him dead. The body of the slain Pathan was removed and buried, and his family seemed reconciled to the fate of its head, but his sons nursed their revenge and awaited an opportunity of fulfilling it. They succeeded in stealing upon the Guru's retirement and stabbed him mortally when asleep or unguarded. Gobind sprung up and the assassins were seized, but a sardonic smile played upon their features, and they justified their act of retribution. Their Guru heard. He remembered the fate of their father, and he perhaps called to mind his own unavenged parent. He said to the youths that they had done well, and he directed that they should be released uninjured. The expiring Guru was childless, and the assembled disciples asked in sorrow who should inspire them with truth and lead them to victory when he was no more. Gobind bade them be of good cheer. The appointed 10 had indeed fulfilled their mission, but he was about to deliver the Khalsa to God, the never dying. He who wishes to behold the Guru, let him search the Granth of Nanak. That's it. Just look at the book. They became people of the book. He who wishes to behold the Guru, let him search the Granth of Nanak. The Guru will dwell within the Khalsa, be firm and be faithful wherever 5 Sikhs are gathered together, there will I also be present. Yeah, he's going to be there, so. Gobind was killed in 1708 at Nadar on the banks of the Godavari. He was in his 48th year, and if it be thought by any that is obscure and belied the promise of his whole life, it should be remembered that quote, the hand of man is but a tardy servant of the brain, and follows with its leaden diligence the fiery steps of fancy. Which is Sir Marmaduke Maxwell, a dramatic poem. The priest of the temple in Nadar represents the one assassin of the Guru to have been the grandson of the Pantha Khan, slain by Herr Gobind, and they do not give him any further cause of quarrel with Gobind himself. That when Muhammad was a fugitive from Mecca, the lance of an Arab might have changed the history of the world. And that the Achilles of poetry, the reflection of truth, left Troy untaken. The Lord of the Myrmidons, destined to a short life and immortal glory, met an end almost as base as that which he dreaded when struggling with Simons and Scamander and the heroic Richard in Eastern and Western fame, whose whole soul was bent upon the deliverance of Jerusalem. So what's this section called? Opened. Reading from the history of the Sikhs. the reading history? Yeah. Sikhism undergo.
Oh shit. Damn it. 8. What happened?
This is more a sample of the book than a reading of the book, because it's not that all the readings are not contiguous, so you don't have all the book, really. You can't get the missing pages. So I suggest you get the book.